Good morning, people. Just a short video to add to the body of information that's starting to emerge at this point that's not fully understood concerning the corporate nature and the fucking corporate and financial shell game that the government is playing through their government corporate entities. So the last couple of weeks, people have been able to find the ABNs of certain government departments, apparently, or government administrations, etc., that you would think would be government entities, non-corporate government entities, but they actually turn out to be corporate entities, registered with an ABN, etc. So the main problem with that initially is that there becomes a conflict of interest. That's a legal term. You can look at that. You can look at that straight away in Black's Law Dictionary. Because the government is representative of the people and it is there to serve the people, to govern the people. The government sees its role, though, as a form of control of the people. And it looks for the best way to do that. Eventually all governments fall into that way of thinking, especially when they get away from a biblical and Christian approach to government, where the governors and the leaders of the land and the leaders of the people are to govern and fear according to the law of God primarily, and in fear of the Lord God Almighty, knowing that they will be held accountable by a greater judge than themselves. So the further a government gets away from that principle, which is a biblical principle, which is also, because that principle comes out of the King James Bible, the authorised version of 1611, that is also part of the law of England. That's why the kings and queens swore fealty to God Almighty in their service of the people as the crown. Because there was a time when they actually believed that structure. They followed that structure of government in a more enlightened day. Hate to say it, but you have to go a fair way back in history to actually find men and women amongst the crown who lived in the truth of that fear of God. So the further away people get from that, and that form of government directly accountable to the Lord God Almighty, the more corrupt and the more they will look for ways to control the people. Right? Because the people see the government there as a service to the people, but the government sees itself as a form of control of the people. Its primary function is to control the people. That's why you see now through digitisation, everything is being streamlined and centralised, because that makes it just so much easier and so much cheaper. Because these things are fucking corporate entities, man. They're worried about their profit margin. They have stakeholders, not the people of Australia that they have to account to, but they're investors, right? Yeah, we don't get a say. We're the people of Australia. They only exist because of our constitution, which we agreed to, right? And yet we are not counted as stakeholders in these government corporations. Every Australian should be a stakeholder, should have a share in any government corporation. Right, because if they're there to serve the people of Australia, then the people of Australia are the stakeholders. No, it doesn't work that way. Once they corporatise, they get other private corporations and other private individuals become their fucking stakeholders. and they answer to them, right? Especially when it has to do with the profit margin, right? Because all, yeah. And don't tell me that the government is not trading, can't trade on the stock market. It has traded itself. It has traded this fucking country. Go and look at the bloody prospectus that you can download off the Australian Mint website. The prospectus of Australia made for overseas investments submitted to the SEC, right? Security Exchange Commission in the US. Yeah, they fucking trade on the stock market. They trade us. They trade our country. They trade all our wealth and all of our human and environmental assets, etc. Everything. Even our compliance ratings, etc. is all traded on the stock market, right? So they do trade us. They do trade on the stock market. Thus, they have fucking stakeholders that are not the Australian people, and that is the problem with the corporatisation of government, right? You end up with a third tier, a third party of stakeholders who have no business interfering between the government, the constitutional government of a country and its people. And yet we find everywhere there's evidence of it all through the COVID-19 pandemic. There's evidence that third-party stakeholders are actually telling what the Australian government what to do with its own people in response to certain situations through institutes and other corporate entities, right? That are linked to international corporate entities. So that's the problem at this point, because all of the major corporations are going for globalisation, right? They've been doing it for years. So at this point, you've got an international network of corporations that have a direct interest in your country, the Commonwealth of Australia. And unfortunately, because they are stakeholders in the government corporations, the government feels more answerable to them than it does to the people of the Commonwealth of Australia. And that is absolutely unconstitutional. That is not what the people agreed to when we constituted this nation and federated Australia. And it is the people who constituted this nation, not the government. Read the preamble. 1901. Doesn't start off, whereas we, the government of the states of Australia. No, it says, whereas we, the people. Because even the act itself had to be passed by referendum of the people. Go and read how the Constitution was constituted, how it came into being. Right, it was constituted by referendum of the people in the states of Australia. Even that act had to be agreed on by constitution. That's why they're going to try and do the same thing with the Republic, but they're not going to give you a chance to vote on the Constitution itself. They're just going to bundle that in with your referendum vote for the Republic. Right? And the Constitution will just be part and parcel of that. That should be a separate thing again. It was in our initial Constitution. In our Constitution that constituted the Commonwealth of Australia. Go and read the history of it. And understand that this leads to treason. When you allow the government to step out from underneath that Constitution and its limiting and binding power under the laws of England as well, under common law, right? Because that is all part of it. Common law jurisprudence is one of the fundamental building blocks of the law of England and the Westminster system. And common law is used everywhere in Australian law still, and especially at the Supreme and High Court levels. They try to keep it out of the magistrates' court, the local courts, right? The purely corporate entity type courts. Yeah. They try to keep it out of there because it shows that the living person, the living soul, created in the image of God, has certain innate and certain basic rights, even under law, that the corporate system of tribunal justice tries to work around, because it is trying to process you as not as a living person, as a living, breathing man. It's trying to process you as a legal fiction, as an unliving corporate entity, or fictional legal construct. You become a legal construct. Like it says here at the beginning of this article that I wanted to point to, has a separate legal personality from the actual real thing, right? The real thing. The living man is the real thing, right? But they want to deal with you as a separate legal personality, a legal fiction. And this is how convoluted this shit is, man. It's fucking, they've woven this system over the top and in throughout the constitutional system to basically lead us into commercial enslavement, right? Where we're actually enslaved to the corporations and we're being governed by the corporations rather than by our constitutional government that we vote for, or supposedly vote for. So what I found today, after watching Carl Leibold and Kaz Smith talking about finding the ATO ABN, which they found on ABN Lookup, which is where I found the Victoria Magistrates Court ABN the other week, which I posted on one of my previous videos. I think the last video I put up was about that. So they didn't, as far as I watched from their second interview, they didn't know what to make of a lot of the stuff. And they didn't just bring out the points that as far as I watched anyway, they didn't really bring out these points. Maybe they did later in the points that I've just hit on, and the limitations around the power that can be exerted by corporate entities, even government corporate entities. You find some plain statements in law about that. But they've tried to get around that with legislation. And this is what I want to show you here. And this is, this I hope, and without being a smart ass or anything, I just point Kaz Smith and Carl Leibold to these particular sites and for them to do digging and research, man, because the stuff that I just found here this morning in about half an hour is already, I'll show you some of the stuff even that doesn't have to do directly with ABN, but is able to show the internal reorganisation and reshuffling of the government, right, since toward the end of last year, in preparation for the new trusted digital identity system to really come into full swing, and also the restructuring for the new the new republic, and also restructuring for the global New World Order agenda in the form of the amount of power that the environmental sector will now wield over daily governance and the direction of the daily lives of the people of the Commonwealth of Australia. And in fact, that is how they're trying to push this thing globally. Right, and they're really pushing that side of it here, as you'll see the restructuring here in Australia, which is what I can show you from the top link that I've got there. But I just wanted to show, if anyone passes this on to Carl Leibold or Kaz Smith, these are the places where you can research and dig deeper with the stuff that you've already found and the reasons why. Right, why is this shit set up the way it is? Why? Right, which is what they weren't bringing really in the parts that I saw. They weren't. They basically said, look at all this stuff, but we don't understand it. So you need to dig in these places, right? This is from a search, and this is where you're going to find your information. So take heed of these sites. This will be a step forward. I'm not saying you're going to find all your information there, but this will actually give you another. It's the next sniff. It's the next scent along the trail, at least through looking at these things and researching them directly through government avenues, which I find is often reveals some of the most damning information. Especially if you have a little bit of background knowledge of what's actually happening behind the scenes, generally speaking, you can then see how the things that they reveal line up with globalist, corporate, international agendas, elitist agendas. So these are the places, man. Like even this sort of stuff, legal form and government's arrangements. That is a very interesting thing to look at, and that's at the fucking Attorney General's now. The Attorney General's actually been given a lot more portfolios, or a lot more corporations, corporate entities that come under their fucking portfolio at the moment, which is quite interesting. So you need to look at things like this. This legislation is what they're using to get around the Constitution and the lawfulness of being able to operate as corporate entities and govern the people. A government business enterprise, blah, blah, blah. So it's a company that's prescribed by rules in the PGPA Act. You need to go and find that and read that. I do have a link to that. State-owned corporations, your company in the law, ASIC, that actually has to do with the director ID shit that's being now forced on CEOs and government company directors because of the necessity of full integration into the digital identity framework. Right, but these were the places, man, these government websites. I'll read you this because this is important. What is a corporate Commonwealth entity? A corporate Commonwealth entity is a body corporate that is separate, that has a separate legal personality from the Commonwealth. A corporate Commonwealth entity can enter into contracts. Hence, everything they do with us is contract offer now. And most of it, most of the big contracts are put out and accepted by acquiescent tacit consent. You don't get a written form of the contract, but it is actually announced publicly. And if the public do not make a public statement of non-compliance, no refusal of contract offer, right? If they don't publicly refuse the contract offer, or if enough of them, right? You need at least 100,000 people on a petition to gain any traction. So that's a fair idea of the sort of response that needs to be seen straight up by the government or by these government corporations when they offer you contract offers in the form of policy or rules or regulations or directions or directives or mandates, right? All of those things are contract offers offered under corporate governance, not constitutional government. Right, most of that is offered and it is received by the people because you do not have a contingent of the people of the Commonwealth of Australia actually standing up publicly and saying, no, we do not accept this. We do not accept this contract offer. No contract, no consent. Because you don't have that, because the offer's been put out there and a time limit has been put on it in order to respond, it then has the clause of acquiescent tacit consent built into it, the same way some of the people's affidavits that they submit to the courts have the same clause built in, because it's a legal fucking clause. It's contract law, man. Corporate commercial law, contract law. Don't you people get it? Fuck, man, this whole thing, you are consenting to your own fucking destruction. And they're laughing at you. They're laughing at you, man. They are fucking the elites and the government and the corporations that are farming you like cattle are just laughing at you because you are willingly consenting to your own fucking demise. And your own enslavement. Do you not understand that? It is your enslavement. Every time you consent and contract with these people, they bring you deeper into this corrupt, unlawful, unconstitutional system. It's legal, yes, it's fucking legal, man, because you consent to it. You legitimize it by contracting with them. So you have to find the proof of what's really happening in your country, and you have to stand up for the truth. And that's the only way you will hold these people to account, and it's the only way you will get any sort of freedom of choice. It's the only way you will even make the government stop long enough to take notice of you as a person. And not just process you as a commodity. Right, so has a separate legal personality from the Commonwealth. A corporate Commonwealth entity can enter into contracts and own property separate from the Commonwealth. Corporate Commonwealth entities are still part of the Commonwealth government. But they do not have the power of governance over the people of the Commonwealth of Australia. I believe that's the distinguishing point. You need to research that and find that. But when you go to this site and you look at what it has to say, so the first thing you need to do is find out why they are incorporating and why they have so many people listed as listed on their ABNs, right? So you need to understand the way then that the government bodies are structured. So you go to this. This page outlines the governance structures that support Australian government bodies to undertake government activities. So now you're actually looking at their unlawful legislative excuses, right? And their legislative structure that allows these corporations, government corporations, to undertake government governance and government activities, i.e., fuck with the people of Australia, of the Commonwealth of Australia. There are 4 types of governance structures. These are outlined in the diagram below. Now you need to come and look at this shit and see how they've structured their system if you're going to really understand the games that they're playing with the corporate identities and ABNs. Now this is what you want to go to. All primary bodies are subject to the Public Governance, Performance and Accountability Act 2013, of course. All right. That is where you will find a lot of the information that explains the way they are now using corporate governance instead of constitutional government on every level of Commonwealth government interaction with the people of the Commonwealth of Australia. So this is the legislation that they've used to do that, and it'll explain a lot if you've bothered to go and read that. Also, you have primary bodies are included on the flip chart list of Commonwealth entities and companies can be found, and that's a downloadable PDF, which I downloaded, I believe. You have to go to this site. Now, there's more information that you can see here. What is a non-corporate Commonwealth entity? Reasons for creating a non-corporate Commonwealth entity. So if you have to be directly accountable to the government. Departments of state. Now you need to understand this for what I'm going to show you on the next site. Some of this. And these things are created by administrative arrangement orders. Where it's an order, right? This is the other thing you need to understand, and this is something that I found out during the COVID pandemic bullshit, was that these sort of things, administrative arrangement orders, this most likely comes under the same sort of legal document as a directive, a health directive that was issued by the state health departments during COVID, or a government mandate, or a private corporate mandate that was issued trying to enforce certain medical interventions, right? It's what they call soft law or grey letter law. And there's 2 very good white papers that I found back in 2020 that discuss those things and why government uses those things. It comes as a result of them corporatising and needing more agile machinery to actually set up their laws and their practices of governance. Legislation which carries legal weight in the Commonwealth corporate constitutional judicial system carries some legal weight, provided the legislation is actually enacted properly too. But where that process is far too slow for corporations, who need to establish rules and policies and orders and directives and all of that shit in a fairly short time frame, because it directly results on them getting their work done, which directly results on them reaching the correct profit margins for their fucking quota for the quarter, etc. Blah blah fucking blah. Right? It's all based around greed. It's all based around better performance, more money, better returns to the stakeholders, etc. Once again, the stakeholders are not the fucking people of the Commonwealth of Australia. They're other fucking corporations, private corporations, government corporate entities, or government entities, or fucking private individuals, right? Not the people of the Commonwealth of Australia. And that's wrong, man. If they set these things up, they should have been set up where each person in Australia is a stakeholder in that government corporation, right? And then they become that is the only way to keep a corporate entity accountable to the people, man. Once again, I tell you, the only way to get through to a corporation is not by fucking rules and laws. It's by fiscal policy and by commercial disruption and peaceful mass non-compliance, non-consent with their contracts. Simple as that. And there's no other way. You won't fucking crack it any other way. It's just they're not listening. They don't believe that they have to listen to anything else. You have to force them to listen by hitting the thing that really hurts them the most, man. Their fucking profit margin, their hip pocket, the smooth process of commerce. You can't interrupt their commerce, man. Right? Everything has to go smooth. We have to make our fucking money nice and smooth, dude. Don't fucking rock the boat. Don't make any waves. And that's why there's so much control layered into our society, man, is so that these people can just keep making their money in a smooth, orderly manner. Right? And we are part of their fucking cash stream, part of their income stream. So they manage us just like they manage their other resources. What I need you to understand here, though, is the power of the portfolio, because then you will begin to understand why they made the changes that I'm about to point out to you on the next page. Department of States are main bodies that reflect the structure of government. Examples of Department of State include Department of Finance within the finance portfolio, portfolio. Yeah, it's about it, man. Finance portfolio, Department of Defence and Department of Veteran Affairs, both within Defence portfolio, Department of Health within Health portfolio, Governor General. So this is actually part of the function of Governor General in Council, who is actually the administrative government of Australia, the Executive Council, which is the Governor General in Council. Establishes departments of state and appoints the ministers that administer them. The administrative arrangements order available on Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet website. I suggest you go and look at that, but that you will find is probably not legislation at all. It is grey letter law, man. It is soft law, and it carries no more legal weight than any of the fucking COVID mandates did, right? Because if you challenge it against law, it has no legislative foundation, right? They may point to pieces of legislation to try and draw their authority from, but if they can't substantiate the lawfulness of what they're trying to do in light of our Constitution and and the law of the Commonwealth, right, then it carries no weight of law in our judicial system. So a lot of this stuff can be challenged. If you look at it and see what it is, you will find ways to challenge it lawfully. Available on each Department of State, and the legislation administered lists the matters dealt with by each Department of State and the legislation administered by each minister. And this is something you need to understand, that each portfolio, when a company comes into a new portfolio, it is then under the legislation that is governed, that governs the department and probably created that department and gave its authority and its structure and its authority to act as well as it's the way it's organised, its authority. Each time a corporation gets placed into a new portfolio, it basically comes under the jurisdiction of the authority that is legislated to that department, right? So they can play, if they want different companies to have different power and access different jurisdictions, or to be held under different laws of conduct, then they shuffle them around between the portfolios, and you'll see this actually happening on the next page, right? To bring them under the legislative power of the minister, right? What it says here, and the legislation administered by each minister. So there is very definite legislation for each minister in each department, right? As the head of that department. That department is actually created by, if it's a government department, it's actually created by specific government legislation. Now, whether that legislation is lawful or not to start with is another fucking question again, which then bears directly on the lawful proceedings of that fucking department. So you can go back that far, and maybe that's how far back we need to go in order to get any traction against these motherfuckers. But if you're just looking at it within their system, you begin to realise now why they're shuffling shit around, which I will show you on the next page, which we enter by following this link here. So you need to download this. That's at the Department of Finance again. If you really, especially Carl Leibold and Kaz Smith would probably find this flip chart very interesting in their research. And also this, again, Public Governance, Performance and Accountability Act needs to be read. So the flip chart is a reference to all non-corporate and corporate government, Commonwealth entities and companies. Commonwealth entities and companies are government bodies that are subject to blah, blah, blah. Commonwealth entities and companies on the flip chart are organised by their portfolio. Portfolios are established through the administrative arrangement order, right, by the Prime Minister and Cabinet, Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. So they shuffle shit around internally depending on which portfolio, which legislation, which set of new powers or authorities they need those companies to actually run under at any particular time. And you see how they fucking do it here. And a lot of it has to do, like I said, that at the moment, a lot of the reason they're doing it is streamlining and preparing for the next push into globalism through climate change and control of society and people and people's freedom and rights under the fucking banner of climate change, which is part of the Agenda 2030 narrative and compliance. Anyone who's on board for that, and Australia clearly is on board for Agenda 2030, will have to comply with the way that they push things. So you're going to get another push from the World Health Organization, and you're going to get another push from the WEF, and you're going to get another push from the UN regarding climate change. And all those will come through the Australian government because they're directly tied into those corporations and organisations. and follow their agendas. So when you come down and you actually have a look at some of the changes that have been made, this is another list that you can provide, that you can download, which is, I believe, what we have here. Changes to the flip chart. You got date, a row of date, the change, the entity name, the portfolio that it comes under, and the change details. Right, so, and this is interesting too, to see who's who in the zoo. So here's Indigenous Land and Sea Corporation. So these are people supposedly that are sovereign people, right? And yet they are creating their own corporate entities within the government, and the government is creating corporate entities for them. Prime Minister and Cabinet, so it comes under the portfolio Prime Minister and Cabinet, so it's being kept in very close to the centralised administrators of the government. Governance structure or characteristic change from material to small. Right, so I think it's been downgraded. Then you've got clean energy regulator, climate change, energy, the environment and water. Governance structure or characteristic change from small to material, so it gets bumped up. Office of the Fair Work Ombudsman, Employment and Workplace Relations is its portfolio. A new non-corporate Commonwealth entity established by Fair Work Legislation Amendment, Secure Jobs, Better Pay Act 2022, 6th of March. So it's just recent, 2023. Fair Work Ombudsman registration, registered organisation and commission entity, etc. Entity abolished as a non-corporate government entity by an amendment to Schedule 1, so they abolished that and they replaced it with that. So there's some serious restructuring. There's more here, but I want to show you these. Here's another one, Northern Territory Aboriginal Investment Corporation. Prime Minister and Cabinet, a new corporate Commonwealth entity established on 15th of November 2022. Financial Advisor Standards and Ethics Authority by the Treasury, was deregistered by the ASIC on 10th of September 2022, ceasing as a Commonwealth company. And here's some more restructuring. National Recovery and Resilience, I'm not making hand signs either, sorry. National Recovery and Resilience Agency, Home Affairs, NRRA abolished as a non-corporate Commonwealth entity on 3rd of September 2022 with functions transferred to the NEMA. National Emergency Management Agency, Home Affairs. So here's one that they just created. They got rid of that one, and now they've actually replaced it with this one, National Emergency, NEMA, National Emergency Management Agency, a new non-corporate Commonwealth entity established 1st of September, integrates the functions of the NRMA, the NRRA and Emergency Management Australia, a group within the Department of Home Affairs. Independent Hospital Pricing Authority, Agricultural Department. Here we go. This is interesting. This is one of the main shuffle arounds that I wanted you to see too. Australian Crime Commission, Australian Criminal Intelligence, and I'll just show you these and then I'll sign off because I've already talked for long enough. But you get an idea of what's going on here, and you can do, this is where you want to go and do more research as far as I'm concerned. To start with is more preliminary research to get an idea of what's actually happening. But here, this shows, you can see what I'm talking about. If you look at this shit, it shows a lot of the internal reshuffling that's happening and the moving of portfolio. You'll see now that these things are being moved from one portfolio to another, or they're being updated from one corporate entity or non-corporate entity to another. Right, one's being decommissioned, another one's being recommissioned, and there would be probably new legislation. So this is a way they get around the old legislation too, is that they decommission one of their departments or whatever, and they recommission it as a new department with new legislation, more updated, more in line with the elite globalist narrative. Australian Crime Commission, Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission, Attorney Generals, entity moved from Home Affairs portfolio. So up until then it was in the Home Affairs portfolio, moved to the Attorney General's portfolio, and once again I say the significance of that is that it places it under different legislative authority and jurisdiction to some extent, right? What it can do, or what the new portfolio can do with it. Australian Federal Police, Attorney Generals. Well, that's where you would have thought they were, except it says here that entity on the 1st of September 22. It says that the entity was moved from Home Affairs portfolio to the Attorney General's portfolio. What were they doing in the Home Affairs portfolio up until then? And how long had they been there and for what purpose, right? And now they've moved him back to the Attorney General's. Australian Institute of Criminology, again, moved from Home Affairs back to the Attorney General's. Australian Transaction Reports and Analysis Centre, moved from Home Affairs back to the Attorney General's portfolio. Office of Special Investigator moved from Home Affairs to the Attorney General's portfolio. And then you've got these: Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water is its own portfolio too, mind you. It's its own department. New Department of State created to be known as Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water. So new Department of State means it is then being enacted by the executive, which means this is the work of the Governor-General in Council to create this. Then you've got Bureau of Meteorology is moved from Agriculture and Water and Environment portfolio to Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water portfolio, and they're doing that. So they've done that here with all of these environmental departments or corporate entities that function within the government. Climate Change Authority moved from Industry, Science and Energy to Climate Change, so they're consolidating power. Anything to do with climate change, they're consolidating power under a new department, which would have its own legislation and its own powers under that legislation. So they're consolidating power into a new power base that's called Climate Change, energy, the environment, and water. So the barrier reef goes from agriculture, water and environment into climate change, into the portfolio. So everything now is coming under, a lot of this stuff is now coming directly under the authority and jurisdiction of energy, climate change, energy, environment and water. So here you've got the Queensland Water Infrastructure Authority, going from infrastructure, transport, regional development and communications portfolio to climate change. So they're fucking getting control of everything, man. All your water. Right, once again, marine science, going from industry science, energy and resources to climate change portfolio, new executive, new Department of State. Yeah, and if you look into that and you read the legislation that created that, you'll find that these motherfuckers have got an insane amount of power. That's why everything's been shuffled over into this, a consolidation into one much more authoritative power base than what all of these separate organisations or entities were. Director of National Parks under climate change, right? So they're swallowing all that up. So this is a major reshuffle that's taken place inside the government. It's already done, man. Because of the time period in the reporting of this list. You can see when it was done. All at the end of last year. Right, so I'll sign off there. That in itself shows where the Australian government is up to and what its direction is. Regardless of anything else that you want to look at, man. It's right there. You can see it clearly. And these are the places, these sort of places are where you're going to dig deeper and find more of what the government's been doing in their corporate layer, and undermining the basic principles and rights that the people of the Commonwealth of Australia have under their constitution, to be treated in a fair and to be governed in a fair manner that is for their benefit and well-being and the benefit of the nation. The nation is not benefiting by this. We're losing our sovereignty as a nation. We might become a republic, but we'll only become a nation state of will only become a nation state of a much wider power base, governance power base. So we become less independent again than we are now. And that's a real concern. That is where you will that's where you've lost your freedom already. So if we let this slide and we just keep turning a blind eye to everything that we can see happening, and we keep just complying and consenting, then we have no one to blame but ourselves for our own destruction, because we have agreed to it. We have fucking agreed to it. And I can't understand. I cannot understand why we are doing that. Why people just can't see this and stop. Stop doing what they're fucking doing and say no. No, this has to fucking stop. No, we do not consent. Why? Why won't you stand up? Not even for yourselves, but for your children. But I know you're too selfish to even give a fuck about your children. So not even for yourselves, not even for your own skin. You think that by complying and keeping your head down that it's going to be better for you? It's that very thing that has brought us to this place as a nation. And I just can't understand what's happened to the Aussie people. Why they won't stand up.